Okay, hopefully you're seeing my screen. Welcome everyone to our Future Teacher Reflected series, and on this occasion it's our Inclusive Practice Special. We've run the Inclusive Practice topic a number of times and also a special last year as well, and so we're repeating the special this year with new guest speakers. Hopefully you're seeing my screen, and on the screen you'll see the registration form or the link to the registration form that you visited. And on the page now, there's this panel that became live at 12:30 today, with a summary about the topic, the core hosts, and then a pane for each of our guest speakers. Normally we would have presentations linked, but there's no presentations today, but there is some information about each of our guest speakers. And then further down the page, like all of our topics, you'll find links to previous recordings and presentations. And as you can see, we go back with this topic as far as 2018, and there's the text chat and so on all embedded with it below those recordings. So we will be recording the discussion today, and also in the Zoom interface you can turn on captions if you require. You want to open the chat pane because there'll be questions, and you might want to open the participants pane to see who's participating in the session, as well as obviously the webcams that you'll see during the presentations. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing now and hand over to Alistair. Are you going to introduce?
Okay, yeah, I'll do that. Okay, so very pleased to welcome Julian Tenney from the University of Nottingham. Julian has been a massive advocate of digital accessibility for a very long time. The originator of the Xerte online toolkit, and has been spearheading a group of, well, a community really of people committed to try to pull together the best practices across the UK in higher education and digital accessibility. And Julian's going to talk about a conference that he is leading up at the end of June. So Julian, over to you.
And thank you for the opportunity to come along and give a plug to the event. So this is the second Digital Accessibility Conference that we're running from the University of Nottingham, and with a lot of help from our community partners across the sector. So last year we had a runaway success with the event. We had almost 300 people turn up to Nottingham, which was stunning. This year we're running the event online, but in a hybrid format. So we're going to have it on Teams, but there will be a number of local hubs where people are coming together to share the day in person. And if you're participating that way, I think there's great benefit in bringing together all the people in your institution, spend a day listening to some talks and presentations around all aspects of digital accessibility. So we've got three themes: leadership and governance, delivering capability, and realising the benefits. And we have a massive programme. Thank you to everybody that submitted proposals. We have 50 odd talks across a whole range of digital accessibility, from leadership all the way through to making your PowerPoints accessible and all things in between. So our formats are: we have lightning talk, short papers, and a number of roundtable discussions. We're going to run it in 3 parallel tracks, so it will feel much like a normal conference. You have to choose which you want to go to. We've had proposals from around 24 institutions across the whole sector, so we represent all sorts of different people and different institutions with different perspectives. And we have this year over 500 people that have registered their interest, which is huge. So we're just stepping into the arenas where this is the size of some of the really big events that go off across learning technology, and I'm stunned. But what I think that does is reflect the thirst that there is across the sector for this now. And the fact that we've seen these sorts of events in digital accessibility grow from what were quite fringe events not that long ago with very small numbers of people. We're now hitting mainstream stuff and attracting large numbers of people to this is really, really good. So we should have on our website, I'll put the links in the chat when I finish speaking, but on our website you should be able to register for the event on Monday, and we'll have the programme up there as well. I'm still waiting for a few people to confirm that, but it's all looking good. And that's all I wanted to say right now. So we look forward to seeing you all on June 26th.
Thank you very much. So really encourage people to sign up for that. Julian will put the links in the text chat very shortly. And I'm sure Therindu and Ben, who are going to be speaking next, I'm sure they're going to be not only at the conference, but doubtless providing some sort of input. Is that right? Yeah. I thought that would be the case. So very pleased that Therindu and Ben have taken the time to come and spend some time with us today, because they are both in the enviable position in some ways that they have a defined accessibility role within their organizations. And many organizations would love to have that level of kind of support and commitment towards accessibility. But one of the things we're clear on is that quite often an organization has no idea how to start. What would a full-time accessibility role look like? What would they do? What level would they be at in the organization? So we thought today was an excellent opportunity to ask two people who are doing that. And we're going to do this by way of a sort of brief to and fro interview. And so I'll start now with the first interview question. And for my colleagues timing me and giving me a halfway point, this is the point to start. So the first question that I have for both of you is, in the chat pane, what prior skills, experiences or interests prepared you for this job? So Therindu, do you want to lead first on that one?
Sure. Thank you, Alessa. I certainly didn't start out as to become a digital accessibility officer. I didn't even know what that was at the time. So I have graduated with an engineering degree, specializing in computer science and engineering. I started off as a software developer, software engineer, senior software engineer. Then I got a scholarship from University of Reading. So I came here to do my PhD, ICTs for distance education. Then I was a postdoc here, then a teaching fellow. At the time, I was doing a MOOC with FutureLearn. And in that MOOC, I met a learner who wasn't able to engage with our course because they had a color vision deficiency. And we were doing a course teaching programming, but we used a game, like a billiard game, with a green background, and there was a red ball. So that's the incident that sparked my interest in digital accessibility. Then I moved on to a completely online institution, University College of Estate Management, as a instructional designer. Then I was a learning technology researcher there. I chaired the online learning research center for them, and we did a lot of work with digital accessibility when I was there. And then University of Reading advertised for this job, digital accessibility officer, because of my interest in digital accessibility. Then I moved here. So I have technical expertise as a developer. Then I have taught a little while, done some research, and now I'm a learning tech. I've done learning technology as well, and then now I'm a digital accessibility officer. So
that's an almost entirely unpredictable route in some ways.
Exactly.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask Ben the same question, because I think Ben, and I know Ben's route a little bit more. Unpredictability is probably a key thing in that as well. Is that right, Ben? What was your route?
Yeah, absolutely. I was I started out slightly differently to Therindu. I was doing teacher training when I first left university. I thought I did English. I'll like everyone, I'll go and be an English teacher. And as part of that, I was very fortunate to get a placement at a school for blind and partially sighted young people. And much like Therindu mentioned, it kind of really made me aware of some of the challenges and barriers that I really hadn't considered before. I really enjoyed that experience, but I didn't pursue teaching for the reasons I think a lot of people don't pursue teaching. It's a challenging profession, and I was very young and a bit green, and so I went into the world of librarianship, and I've always been really interested about the power of information and what information, you know, how that can allow people to be independent, informed, not just in the world of academia, but just as, you know, informed citizens to be involved in a wider community. And I guess this is going back quite a while, where we were sort of on the cusp of that digital kind of explosion. And I really felt very strongly that digital should be the answer to a lot of the accessibility questions and challenges that I'd seen previously. And I was very frustrated as a librarian that a lot of the electronic resources that we were buying and paying lots of money for didn't seem to reflect this, and we were missing an opportunity. I was working at another institution at the time, and I was a bit like a dog with a bone. I wouldn't stop talking about this, and I kept complaining about it. And then one day, the head of student support and wellbeing at the university kind of called my bluff and said, right, just to keep you quiet, we've got some funding. We'd like you to do a year's project to tell us what we should be doing. How do we make this better, given all of the things in the landscape? So it kind of put me on the spot a little bit, because I had to leave kind of the world of librarianship and take a bit of a leap into this kind of unknown world to me at the time of, well, how do we make these things accessible? It all felt a little bit emergent at the time. This is going back even before the public sector body's digital accessibility regulations. So there wasn't that kind of that wider push that we later experienced. So I felt very lonely, and that I'd made a terrible career mistake initially, because I just felt really out my depth, and I wasn't an expert in this. And Alistair kind of already alluded to it. I had the great good fortune to have seen Alistair speak at various library events I'd been to, and always inspired by the message that Alistair had, that effectively, if you make stuff accessible, you generally improve it for everyone. It was a really powerful message. And I reached out to Alistair, more of a cry for help, I think. And Alistair brilliantly responded, and as Alistair always does, finds the kind of opportunities in everything. And we worked together to Alistair was working for JISC at the time, and JISC had this kind of, sector-wide kind of approach, but perhaps don't always have the opportunity to kind of get right down to the coalface. So we kind of worked on a proposal that we would, at the university I was in, we would try and bring to life some of the JISC initiatives and ideas, and we would then give feedback to Alistair and JISC, and how some of those things might translate to other universities. That project,
just 20 more seconds on this
bit,
okay, because I've got lots of other questions.
Okay, so that project was supposed to be a year. It then turned into another year, because one of the things I think maybe Thurinder would feel the same, that accessibility isn't done. You don't just sort of think, oh, we've got someone in, let's get someone in to come and fix accessibility in a year, and then it'll all be done. It's an ongoing journey, and I think we'll explore that more in some of the later questions.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. And the key thing that I want people to take away from there is that wherever you're sitting, don't think to yourself, oh, I couldn't push for or apply for an accessibility role because I haven't had sort of 6 years working with AbilityNet or something in that role. Bring what you've got. And with both Thurinder and Ben, what brought them to the place where they are is above everything else. It was the human elements, and it was that desire to make a difference. So take that with you. I'm going to ask where you sit, and this is a brief, hopefully it's a brief question. Where do you sit in the university organizational chart, and how does that either help you or hinder you? So in the chat pane for people listening, that's our halfway. So this will be a nice short one on this. Ben, do you want to go first? Where are you on the organizational chart?
I sit in information services, which is a kind of technical department. That helps in that a lot of the systems we need to reach and influence and audit and improve are technical. But in a way, it's also a downfall in that it's technical, and actually it kind of could create the impression that we are purely a technical thing, whereas we're a hearts and minds thing as well.
Thank you. And Thurinder, what about you? It's similar or different?
I also sit in the digital technology services. That's the IT department.
Yeah.
So I also feel the same, that it feels a little bit distanced from the teaching side. But if I were placed there, I'm sure I will feel the same about the other side, not being close to systems.
So you've told me a little bit about your opportunities and your frustrations within where you're placed, and that would be true wherever you sat. You would, because accessibility is very broad. What I'm interested in is, who are your key allies? And again, this might be partly to do with where you sit, but it might also be to do with personalities and friendships and so on that you develop. So again, in the chat, I will put that. Who else has accessibility responsibilities in the organization? So that, again, in the chat. So it's about your allies. Who else supports you? How do you work with them? Thurindu, do you want to go first?
Sure, that's a great question. So when I'm looking at accessibility here, I'm talking only about digital accessibility.
Yep.
I report to cyber and information security and director for cybersecurity and digital assurance. So he sits in a level where he can support me with funding or whatever the necessary changes. I also have a meeting with Pro Vice Chancellor, who is championing digital accessibility inclusion, disability inclusion. So that also gives me support from the senior level. I also work closely with Dean for Diversity and Inclusion, and we also have some groups, Diversity and Inclusion Community of Practice, which is a community of practice where people from each and every department or function is represented. Those are the formal, if you like, pathways that I have, allies. But most of all, I have another group of people who support accessibility as volunteers. We call ourselves Digital Accessibility Action Group. It's volunteers from HR, content, digital technology services, and technology enhanced learning are represented there. We have another group looking at accessibility and the website. Again, volunteer group, not anything formal. And there's another grassroots level group called Accessibility Interest Group. So all these are people who are my allies.
Right. And you've got that good mix of some are formal part of the structure and some are informal allies and volunteers and people of passion, but you've also got that access to I think Mike put something there, who controls budgets, which I won't get you to answer that straight away, but the fact is that you've got the grassroots as well as people who might be able to control budget and authority. Can I ask Ben? Can I ask Ben where it sits with you? Is it similar? Is it different?
I think it's very similar. I think we have a very vibrant equality, diversity, inclusivity community who are looking across all protected characteristics, and I think there's some great allies in those spaces, because we're all kind of pushing for the same thing, this sort of general awareness and inclusion by design, that nothing gets done or nothing's considered finished until it works well for everyone. And I think we can share and gain momentum by kind of echoing those messages. It's the kind of same essential thing. I think Thurindu feels the same, but I feel like a sort of chief planter of seeds in a way that actually everyone's an ally. Everyone who creates content is an ally, in that they're the experts in what they do and the people best placed to do this. I think one of the things we mentioned before about being in a sort of technical, department is it's a risk in that people just think, oh, well, there's a team who fix accessibility and I'll just send them all my stuff and they'll fix it. And I think that would be a real mistake, because nobody really learns anything when that happens. And what we want is the people who create the content and are expert in that content and teaching and the delivery to know how to do that in the most accessible way. So I feel like it's a bit of a tripe answer, isn't it? But it's everyone is an ally, and the more people we can get who are doing that and realize that the sky doesn't fall in when you do this, the more we can get those good practice examples and those agents for change who can be that voice. And I think it's really important that we have these agents who can be the person in the meeting who just puts their hand up and raises a flag for accessibility so it can never be forgotten.
Thank you. That was our 1 minute warning, but Lillian's reminded me that because Julian was very short, didn't take up all his time, we will be able to carry on for another 5 minutes max. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus on the impacts element now, and perhaps Ron, if you could give me a 1 minute warning for 25 past, that would be great. Impacts, do you have ways of measuring your impacts? And what do you consider the biggest impacts that you've made so far? So, Thurindu, do you measure them, and how, and what do you think it's been so far?
That's a great question. Since joining the university, just over 18 months now, we have improved our website accessibility by 44%. That's huge, according to the automatic monitoring tool we use. So I think in a way, that's a good metric to measure the impact if you're looking for a number.
Yep.
At the moment, we are running a digital accessibility awareness survey. So we did one in December 2022. And at the moment, we have over 450 responses this year. And looking at it, it looks really good. We have improved so much. I can't give the numbers right now because the survey is still ongoing. But once the survey is completed, we can again compare that to our last time, because you always have to go forward from where you are. So I believe those will be good numbers in terms of impact.
And can I check, as I'm being a bit devil's advocate here, which is probably naughty, but that's 400 odd responses. What's the total number of staff? What percentage are you hitting at the minute?
I think we have about 5,000 staff.
Yeah.
Last time the survey was filled by only 105 people.
Okay. So you've had a fourfold increase so far.
In responses as well.
And one day, maybe even senior managers will get involved in making that a compulsory thing for people to respond to.
Hopefully, one day.
But can I just go to Ben quickly, because sorry, you may have other points to make, but do kind of bring them back in at the end. Just want to make sure I look at impacts, because that's one of the first things managers will say. They say, okay, well, what is the impact? How can I justify this? Ben, have you got similar data, or have you got different ways of measuring?
We I guess similar. We use like a lot of places, Anthology Ally to measure the accessibility of some aspects of the virtual learning environment and to track, program level, departmental level improvements, and they are kind of trackable. In terms of impacts, it's kind of difficult in a way that I'm really keen that accessibility isn't an extra thing. It is the thing, and therefore it's quite difficult to disaggregate from things like student satisfaction and stuff like that, where if the hope is that where we make stuff more accessible, it just works better for everyone, and everybody has a better time and a wider range of choices about how they access and consume content. It's very difficult to pinpoint, so that's all because we did that thing or we fixed that website. But I think it's I think that there are some pretty strong impacts that we can have that I guess are slightly less measurable, but they're very impactful in their way. So doing things around procurement, having a really robust contract so that we can't buy any new inaccessible systems, I think has been a really powerful impact that's massively improved our ability to procure systems and put pressure on suppliers to behave themselves.
So there's, from what you've both been saying, there's lots of different ways you can measure impact. And I think one of the powerful things in what you've both described, and I know you've been having a very short time to describe huge things that you've done, but I think a key takeaway is for people to realize that if they're looking for impact, if they're wanting to justify impact, don't look at it in a single way, but use this wide range, as wide a range of metrics as you can. I have a final question that I'm not going to ask you to respond to now, because I want to move on to our student panel now, but I'm going to put it in the chat, and I would like it if you could put a chat answer to that, and also look through the chat because other folk have been putting things in there. Here's my final question. The bottom line, if it's not affordable, how would you persuade them that it is? What would stop if your post disappeared? So if you want to do something about that in the chat, that would be brilliant. Thank you very much. I feel terrible at having to kind of rush you through. You've done brilliantly at giving us some really important elements about that background and hopefully inspiration for others. So thank you very much. And Lillian, do you want to introduce our next sector or section?
Yeah, absolutely. I will just get the students up on the screen. If you'd like to carry on with asking your question in the chat, Alistair, for Thurinder and Ben to answer. I'm just going to add our students to the spotlight mode. And can I start asking Ailsa to introduce herself to everyone here?
Master student doing computer science degree, which is entirely online. I use accessible technology myself, and I've also been involved in the past in helping to create accessible teaching material.
Brilliant. And Poppy?
Hi, my name's Poppy. I'm a current computer science undergraduate at York. I'm also disabled myself and use accessible technology to do my degree. It's both in person and online.
Brilliant. And Charlotte?
Hi, my name's Charlotte. I'm a mature student at Bangor University studying marine biology and oceanography. I have mental health and physical disabilities, for which I've used a lot of software, especially Panopta.
Brilliant. And Jemima?
Hi, I'm Jemima. I've just finished my 4th year of French and linguistics at Bangor. I've got autism, ADHD, visual issues and hearing issues, dysgraphia. So I use voice text software and a lot of different digital technologies. And I've also done some work in the past in making documents accessible.
Brilliant. Well, I think we have the perfect panel here to actually talk to us about the kind of impact which is kind of left over from our digital accessibility roles discussion, because I think we all acknowledge that the ultimate impact we want is to make your lives easier as students. So we'd love to find out what works, what doesn't work, and what we could do more of. So like Alistair, I am going to put the questions in the chat so we can keep your faces on the screen for everyone. And I'll ask the question, and then we can go around Ailsa, Poppy, Charlotte, and Jemima. Okay, so we're kind of curious what kind of technology you use, or what kind of tips and tricks you have discovered over time that help you with your learning. Ailsa.
Yeah, certainly. So I use a variety of accessible technology. Sometimes I'll use text-to-speech or speech-to-text. I can change the color background of what I'm working on. I can change the font, the color, size, style, and also the width of the screen. And I will need different things at different times. So being able to use that suite of different technologies rather than just saying I will use this all the time gives me a lot more flexibility. And being able to have something in an accessible format to be able to do that makes a huge difference. So to have something that's actually machine readable makes all the difference to me.
Yeah, Poppy?
So similar for me, because I'm hard of hearing. I tend to use lots of speech to text software, especially in situations like lectures. I particularly use something called Otter AI, and that also allows me to change the look of things, and I can export it to a PDF or a Word document, which allows me to go back and reread, which helps me a lot being able to look back over resources anytime that I need to.
Charlotte?
Yeah, it's similar. I got packages from DSA that included things like Gleam and Dragon, so I can adapt everything to my style. But actually within university, Panopto for me has been a brilliant tool. I have CPTSD, so I don't know when I'm going to get triggered. And it allows me to watch a lecture at home, or if I have to be off because of an appointment or it's a bad day, I can catch up with those lectures in the comfort of my own home, but I'm not missing anything that any of my peers have had access to. Yeah.
And Jemima?
Yeah, so I think similar to what other people have said, technology like Dragon has been really useful. I think also for me, something which has made a big difference is knowing my way around Microsoft Word really well, especially when the majority of documents I get aren't accessible. Actually, if I know all the shortcuts for increasing font size quickly, if you do Control Shift and then the greater than arrow, so I have kind of all the shortcuts internalized for how to kind of make documents accessible for me. And I think that's really useful because when I first came in first year, I'd had to do it at A level, but I was still kind of new to having to make documents accessible for myself. And so now I've been doing that for years. That's kind of made it easier. So I guess it's just sort of the experience of having done that. I also use RNIB Bookshare, which is great for some stuff. You can't get every book on there. Again, it's sort of volunteer led, so it's difficult to get all the books you need, but sometimes, and again, you can change your font color, change your background. Yeah.
Right, I must say, this is like the dream answers for me. I did not prime you guys to say any of that, did I? But that was just the perfect set of answers because it covered so many different things, talking about flexibility and not just being tied down to one technology, but also like Jemima talking about just knowing how to use the everyday tools to the best of their accessibility features as well. And Panopto lecture capture and Poppy as well, just being able to kind of review and revise the way you prefer. Thank you very much. Right, my second question for everyone, what helpful things do lecturers do? And maybe not just lecturers, but maybe there are other support people within libraries or other places like that. And when you finish speaking, if you could pass it on to the next person instead of me saying it, that would be great. So Ailsa could say Poppy, Poppy could say Charlotte, and Charlotte could say Jemima. Thank you.
Yes, certainly. For me, because everything's online, having lecturers who will provide a transcript of what they're saying, as well as having captions, because captions aren't always 100%, but also the ability to contact them if I've got any specific accessibility needs, just the flexibility that I can actually put something forward because they can't think of everything for everybody, and just being able to have that conversation can make a huge amount of difference. On to Poppy.
One thing that makes a big difference for me from lecturers, alongside technology, is being willing to educate themselves on the needs of disabled people. Everything is almost on a spectrum, and I've had a lot of lecturers that assume because I can talk, I've got no hearing disability, and because I have hearing devices but they're hidden, that disability may to them not necessarily exist. So being willing to advocate for your students for their needs has been a really good thing for what my lecturers have done. And like Ailsa said, being able to access PDFs and PowerPoints and that sort of thing, and any extra documents before lectures, personally, I found that to be really good way of making it accessible for students. So on to Charlotte.
Similar answers, in that if the lectures are up before, I can get them into a format ready for me to study them whilst in the lecture and have them in a good format. And another thing for me is the PLSP, so the personal learning support plan. I can just say to a lecturer, I've got a PLSP, and lecturers know, okay, this person has something, they may need help, and they just will adapt to that, because obviously they can't know all their students' needs. That's just enough. And then finally, with the technology, I've been allowed to wear headphones, and just by putting those on, instead of being an issue or anything, just the lecturers will just, you know, do a little thumbs up or something to check I'm okay in a lecture, and that's been brilliant for me. So over to Jemima.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most helpful things that lecturers have done is sending resources in advance of the lecture, especially because you don't always know if it's going to come in an accessible format. So then when the lecturer sends you something, even if it's going to take me 2 hours to make it accessible, I don't get dumped with that 10 minutes before the lecture, because I've had lecturers in the past who would send me stuff 10 minutes or an hour before the lecture when it's 50 slides long and I can't look through all of that. And I think kind of more generally, creating a welcoming atmosphere, and again, an atmosphere that shows that even if they don't know something, they're willing to learn. Like, I've had some really good lecturers who were very willing to kind of go the extra mile with accessibility. And I've also had some less good lecturers. You know, only this year I actually had a lecturer who routinely referred to people with special needs when she meant people with SPLDs and stuff like dyslexia or some ADHD. So, you know, there's still a long way to go. But when teachers show that they are committed to accessibility, I think that's a really good thing.
That's brilliant. That gives us a lot that we can kind of pass on to lecturers and in all our universities. So I've got my third question, and then we've got another couple of questions from the audience, which hopefully they can ask themselves at the end of my official third question. And that is, what technology barriers do you wish could be sorted out? Now, our earlier speakers are talking about accessible content and how difficult it can be to kind of make sure that these things are being done by colleagues. But do you have any ideas, ways, examples, anything at all to say about technology barriers? Ailsa?
I think for me, the biggest barrier is when something's been designed as a paper-based material and it's just put online. So that could be a poorly scanned book, which is virtually impossible to read, especially if there's like a grey fuzzy background, or the other side of the page has been scanned through at the same time, or if exams are set in a way that it's been designed to be on multiple sheets of paper, but is put on one continuous scrolling document, so you can't actually see the resources you're meant to be answering the questions on. So it might be a graph or text paragraph or an image, and the questions in one place, and then you've got to answer in a third place. It's almost impossible to access all that material. So for me, designing it as a digital first resource would make a huge difference.
So for me, one major technology barrier I've had is captioning. I've had to fight my department on this quite a lot. So Panopto does have auto captions, but a lot of the time these are quite inaccurate, or they don't necessarily follow the speaker. And in situations where I'm not able to have a note taker or an interpreter, I have to fully rely on these captions and the resources available. And I really wish that there was more of a push and a drive to make captions accessible and make them available for everybody, because it's not just hearing impaired people that would prefer captions. You know, anybody with any sort of extra need where they might want to be able to visually read it would really benefit from this barrier being sorted. So on to Charlotte.
I definitely have to second the Panopto captions. As I said previously, I use Panopto a lot, and the captions just aren't quite good enough at the moment. They're still helpful, but there's definitely room for improvement there. And then as well, going into the future at the moment, Bangor's adjusting to wanting to go back to everything being more in person and things like this. and I appreciate it's because of the worry about AI technology being used, but going into the future is an apprehension of how will this affect me as a student that relies on technology but not necessarily AI, and how that's going to be incorporated. And then finally, PDFs. Not everybody uses this, and I appreciate people don't want their work plagiarized or just copied. But again, from what we said earlier, being able to take text and adapt it and copy and paste easily, which you can't always do with a PDF, impacts how I can set my work out, ready to study or use it. So maybe building on that as well. So over to Jemima.
Yeah, I would definitely second the PDF thing. PDFs are not editable, and it's really frustrating when the rest of my class on paper is given a sheet that they can write on because it's an exercise to fill in French, and I am given a PDF, which I'm then told, oh, you can just put it through a converter, and the converter then takes it back to the original 1997 Word document. Because one of the big problems that the French department faces is that all of their documents were created in the format of 1997 to 2003. And so they were strictly created to be viewed and to be printed. And again, that's with the Times New Roman, font size 10, serif font, and some truly incredibly bad formatting that I can't even begin to fathom how you create. You know, one of the worst ones I saw was, it looked like it was just bullet points. And then I realized it was actually a text box. And then I realized that in the text box was a table, and they'd taken the borders off the table and then put bullet points in the borderless table in the text box, which also had its borders taken off. And it's just like multiple stages that I cannot even begin to fathom why you would do that. So yeah, I mean, honestly, I would be here all day if I talked about like the individual accessibility issues with a lot of documents, but it generally is just lecturers not knowing how to make a document accessible. Things like use bullet points, don't justify your text, put it in a font big enough that I can actually read it. Also, I think I don't know if this is more of a specific problem to my university, but the way it works by default for us is that on your PLSP, lecturers can't see any of your diagnoses. So on my PLSP, before I specifically spoke to Disability Services to get it changed, it said like needs access to the resources in advance and needs like bigger font, but it didn't say like autism, ADHD, dysgraphia, and like for me that tells such a massive story compared to just like a line of the accommodation I need. So I guess for me it would be great because again the majority of students don't know that their lecturers can't see that. Like if you were at school, all your teachers see. So I think for me, it would be great if students could be made more aware that actually the lecturers can't always see their diagnoses and they can share that if they want. So, yeah, back to you.
That's absolutely brilliant. So our official session is finished, in case Ron rings the bell at me again. But we have had questions from the audience that I'd like to verbalize to you, and I'll put it in the chat again as well. So Amy did ask, have you used Blackboard Ultra in your studies? And I don't think everyone has access to it. What experience have you had with it with regards to navigation and accessibility? So let's talk about it as learning management system, the way things are on your VLEs as opposed to Blackboard Ultra specifically. So if we can be as brief as possible, thank you. We'll start with Ailsa.
I haven't used it, I'm afraid.
So I have used Blackboard, that's our current VLE system, and it was updated, I think, about 6 months ago, and it's a lot more usable and readable for me, being able to have everything split into different modules, and also lecturers can set specific assignments and separate everything out, which helps me with my cognition, my understanding of the content. I found it quite accessible and quite useful, actually. On to Charlotte, sorry.
I've used Blackboard a lot since starting at Bangor University, and it's brilliant that things can be put up in advance and I can go back and look at things, and it leads all the links to Panopto are on there. One of the things that can confuse me a little bit is it's up to each individual lecturer how they lay out what you see on Panopto, and sometimes it's not very organized, and I appreciate they do so much work and they teach so many different classes. But if it almost sometimes, if it was a standardized way of putting it in, that might make it just a little bit more accessible to look at. And another thing is there's the option on Blackboard where people can chat and talk about the question, but I haven't found on my course that people are utilising that. Obviously, I'm a mature student, so the younger people are using Snapchat and things like this, but it would be great to maybe encourage people to talk about their degree in that area in Blackboard as well. So over to Jemima.
Yeah, I think generally I've found the design of Blackboard to be quite accessible. Like you say, it is entirely down to the individual lecturers, how they choose to set out their own like pages for the module, and the module pages can be quite convoluted in their layout depending on the lecturer. And again, it's different for every lecturer. I discovered actually last week that Blackboard has a converter feature for documents, and you can convert documents into different formats. And the reason I didn't know this existed is because it's never worked on my laptop. It comes up with a glitch, basically. And so I always just assumed that it was if a lecturer had decided to give you another option or a different version of the text, you could access it there. But it turns out that's actually just a cool feature of Blackboard that has never worked for me. So I think if that bug gets fixed, that would make it even more accessible. But the main problem is that it's so variable depending on the lecturer.
Yeah, and that sounds like you're talking about Blackboard Ally that you probably have at Bangor as well. Thank you very much for those insights. We'll just ask one last question and then we'll take it out to the floor for discussions. One question about Microsoft's immersive reader feature. Do people know about it and do they use it?
Yes, I use it. I really like it. It's not perfect because it doesn't show images at the same time as text, so you won't necessarily know what you're listening to or reading about, but it can change background color, font size, how much of the screen is visible at one time, and it can read it out, and it's got different voices, so it's great. It is embedded automatically in a lot of Microsoft tools and the web browsers. Canvas, which is a VLE, has it included. However, you've got to change the settings every time you open a page or switch between a page and a diagram. So although it's there, it's effectively useless because it's just too much to do every single time you look at a different paragraph. Poppy, over to you.
So I don't personally have any experience with it, I'm afraid, if Charlotte would like to add anything.
I also haven't any experience with it, I'm afraid. So moving on to Jemima.
Yeah, I've used it in the past, not very recently, but I think I broadly agree. It's a good technology. It's really good in terms of the number of different things that you can kind of edit and make accessible. Because again, like there is no one way to make something accessible, but having something which is easily editable and is in a state where actually if you increase the font size or change the text, that's not going to alter the document too much or its layout is good. So yeah, broadly I think it's good.
Right, thank you very much. Our students, you've been in the spotlight for over 20 minutes. I just want to say a big thank you to you for sharing your experiences. I can't wait to correct these transcripts and turn them into something that we're just going to put them in front of lecturers and go, see, this is what the students are saying. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences. So yeah, if the other future teacher hosts, I'm going to remove spotlight. If the other future teacher hosts would like to mention anything else in the chat that we should pick up on, Teresa maybe? Or
yeah, I'm just scanning back, but I have to say the chat has been very active and it's very dense. So I'm glad that we're going to be, well, obviously we always download it, but I would really sort of suggest that people take the time to look through it in detail because there's so many great bits and pieces coming, and really interesting to see the interplay between our accessibility staff, if you like, and students, because we're all learning right now from each other, which is just what we want. I think the captions issue and the workload issue are probably the main two sort of points that we keep coming back to. lots of people have responded to queries and questions in the chat already, which is really helpful. So thank you all very much for your contributions.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I'd love for Therindu and Ben to come back and join us and share with us in terms of like that perspective of students in your universities. How does that create almost like a backwash that helps what you do in your work? If I'm not putting you on the spot, Therindu and Ben, and anyone else like Gizzy, if you're willing to come on and share that as well, that would be lovely.
Hello, Lillian. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you, Therindu.
This is actually an area that I have not worked too much on. I have only been in this post for 18 months so far. We have only done a few projects with students, which I was involved in. So this year we were doing decolonizing the curriculum mostly as the EDI project. So next year, I'm hoping that I'll get more chance with the inclusion consultants. That's our student group to support EDI initiatives at the university, to do a bit more work with them with accessibility.
Hi, Lillian. I think it's everything. It's so powerful. I think you know, data tells a story. You know that, but nothing brings it to life when, like some of the feedback we've heard from the students today. You know, I think for somebody who hasn't perhaps considered accessibility before in their role, as I think a lot of people, you know, not because they're horrible people, it's just not something that's been immediately on their radar. And I think there's all sorts of reasons why, you know, it'd be great to see that in teacher training more, you know, in things that are required when people start university life. You know, I think that would be a really good thing to raise. But I think so having that student voice and staff voice of an understanding of those barriers and how those barriers can have a very real impact, I think speaks so much, you know, more kind of powerfully than any data ever could. And I think really helps to conceptualize what that means and what the impact is. And I don't think there's any better motivator for change than, you know, because everybody who works in higher education is motivated by giving everybody access to chances to realize their potential. And I think most people, when they realize that something they've done potentially has that kind of impact or could have that impact, that's the fuel they need to put things right going forward. So thank you so much to the students today. I think that voice is, you know, unbelievably powerful.
Absolutely, I so agree. I'm gonna double check with Gizzy if you're happy to come on and just speak about your role as well, about whether you've done work with students. I know Gizzy's done a lot of wonderful work interviewing the staff to try and relay their it's like cultural change, isn't it? The more you hear from other people at the universities that you work in or organizations that you work in, the more you feel like, oh, everyone else is doing this, so I better get on and do that as well. And Gizzy, I don't know if you would like to come on and say anything. Sorry for putting you on the spot.
Yeah, sure. So I only work in a faculty. I work across the university, but I work in a STEM faculty. And we know, we've done a lot of research in faculty, that we have a lot of staff and students in the neurodivergent profile. And we have a lot of strands of work going on at the moment around this. And every time that you work with student advocates, with student representation, you learn something new. There's always something new to try. And they have brilliant ideas around how to get around these things. And it impacts and benefits our staff, because we have an awful lot of staff here in neurodivergent, myself included. And it helps us address some of the really complicated issues we have, because we have a very complex digital environment. We have lots of tools that don't natively talk to each other, so nothing's really integrated, and we have loads of LTIs and things that sort of talk to each other but not quite, and they cause unanticipated issues, and they don't work with our assistive technologies. And it's trying to draw it all together and make something coherent and cogent that can be personalized to each person's study flow or workflow. And they're really good at helping each other with that. Our student advocates have been really, really on the ball this year and involved in lots of projects. So we have a project targeted for neurodivergent students and staff, actually, around new spaces, because we know a lot of staff and students find new rooms, new classrooms, new laboratories, particularly in our faculty, somewhat anxiety inducing and very unfamiliar. They've had no experience of a proper lab. Most of our FE colleges just don't have them anymore. So they are a big source of anxiety. So they've been involved in creating 360 images and tours of all of these spaces that they can download on their mobile phone immediately before they go to the room, or well in advance, and they can select from these. The hope is we'll have data later this year that this will really reduce a lot of that anxiety associated with that. So we couldn't do it without their input. You know, it's their ideas that bring all of this. So really valuable.
Oh, thank you very much, Lizzie, for coming on and sharing that. So yeah, I mean, we have 4 minutes to go. I think we are happy to kind of open the floor for anyone else who would like to say anything. I'm going to try and make sure I can see if people want to put their hands up digitally or on screen.
And Lillian, there's just a quick reminder that Ron is reminding everybody to think about one thing specifically that they will do as a result of what they've seen and heard today. And it's been such a rich collection of hints. I think it's going to be really difficult to bring it down to one thing, but we would love to hear what one thing has been part of this webinar, and just pop it in the chat, going to happen as a result of you taking part. And big thanks to those of you. I know many of you have to go, so thank you very much, and thanks for coming, and thank you for your expressions of gratitude to our wonderful contributors.
Really good things coming up in the chat. Sharing the students' comments. We will be sure to let you know when we've corrected the captions, and you'll be able to find it on our YouTube channel in the same place where you signed up for the webinar. Yeah, absolutely, we will. I think we will get a lot of value from the comments from Therindu, Ben, and the students for many years to come going forward. So thank you very much. Ron, would you like to say anything about the next webinar? What we're doing?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. I've just put the link in the text chat. I'll share my screen as well. And one of the things we always find, I think, with these webinars is there's so much. There's not always time to properly reflect on what you've seen and heard until after the webinar's finished. Well, the next month session is an opportunity to come back and reflect on all of that and pick up on any further questions, because it's all about reflecting on what we've covered, particularly over the last couple of years under the banner of reflected sessions, but also all of the topics over the whole duration of the project, the resources, the recordings. There's lots there. There's lots of people that have used it in their own institutions and used one or more of the sessions and share the resources and so on. And we'd really like to help inform what we do from the autumn onwards by having a session that's reflecting on all of that. And of course, that means what we've discussed today, and inclusion and accessibility has been an integrated part of everything that we've covered. A reminder also that in the page for today's session is the panel with the details about the guest speakers. There's a what next section with tips about and a reminder to join our mailing list, and also the recordings from the previous session, but the recording from today's session, which I'm sure many of you will want to recap on and use and share with colleagues, will be available in possibly before the end of tomorrow, but certainly next week sometime, and we'll announce that availability via our Future Teacher mailing list, which is low traffic, so certainly if you're not part of that, please do join it.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording here.